Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, December 13th. You're joined by me today, Lewis. I am here. I've been here every Wednesday, and we're going to plan on doing Wednesdays for a while here. It was great being back last week. It had been a while. Good to see some familiar faces in the audience as usual. For those of you just joining right now, please smash the like button because we have a fantastic show today. We're going to be starting off with a bit of a recap of 2023 in trains. Unfortunately, not the good kind of trains. We're talking the trains that have been derailing across the United States. Of course, we're going to get into a little bit of East Palestine, and we're actually going to tie it into a great fundraiser that Max Alvarez of the Real News Network is putting together over the weekend in East Palestine. He'll be here with us shortly to discuss some of that. We're also going to get into Zelensky in D.C., what that means for Ukraine aid. He had meetings with President Biden, with bipartisan leaders in the Senate. That's both Schumer and McConnell in the same meeting. We also had a meeting with Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives, the new Speaker of the House, who is kind of holding this Ukraine aid hostage. There's actually some things that I agree with Mike Johnson on in this, which is beyond me at this point. Didn't think I'd be agreeing with that gentleman on much because he is out there on a whole bunch of things. But we're going to get into the details of that, as well as a letter that Bernie Sanders has sent to the Biden administration. In my opinion, it's all a little bit too little too late there, but we will get into the specifics of the letter. But like I mentioned, first, we're going to start talking about trains here. In 2023, we collectively learned a whole lot about trains. If you've been watching us here on Status Coup, whether it be on the ground coverage that we did, starting in February, going through the summer, through our, 4 East Palestine trips that we did, just seeing additional derailments happening across the United States. And you might be wondering, was train derailments in the United States a 2023 phenomenon? No, it's not. In 2022, there were 1,100 derailments. Years before that, there were many, many derailments as well. This is not a new thing. And I had Colin pull together a couple of clips here. And Colin, you can start running these of just a couple of the examples of derailments in the United States. This one is in Wisconsin. We had derailments in all sorts of places. This one, I mean, it's actually spilling into the Mississippi River there, I believe, into a river there. We also had one in Florida. Sorry, this is Nebraska here. All sorts of these derailments happening, some of them in small towns, some of them in rural areas, some of them, dealing with hazardous chemicals like we saw in East Palestine. You've got this one in Florida on the screen right now that actually had a full car of propane that very well could explode. And these trains are going through towns like yours and mine across the United States, small towns, big towns. And in many cases, we have no idea what is on them. I'm sure that car right there in Oklahoma, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about with that one as it bobs down the tracks here. The potential risks with these going on are immense. And the United States has done little about regulating this at any point in time. The coverage of derailments is mostly non-existent. Obviously, in East Palestine, which we can show some of the images on the screen of drone footage that we got exclusively from East Palestine resident Corey Figley back in February. East Palestine got the coverage for a little bit in February and March. Surprisingly, some of it actually continued a bit into April. And now you don't hear very much of this and what has gone on there. Meanwhile, residents there are still suffering from all sorts of health effects. And it's beyond the health effects. It's economical, it's health, it's deception from government. It's government agencies not fulfilling the roles that they're meant to be fulfilling. And actually this week, surprisingly, John Oliver actually put together a decent segment, about a half an hour long, on freight trains in the United States. He actually did a really good job putting this together. In my opinion, I went through and watched it yesterday afternoon. I had Colin pull together just a little bit of it just so you can get a taste. Colin, we can go ahead and play the segment from John Oliver.
But unfortunately, as we saw earlier this year in East Palestine, Ohio, when freight trains go off the rails, they can cause immense damage. That crash incurred an estimated cost of at least $803 million in total damages. And 80% of residents surveyed say they've experienced headaches, rash, coughs, eye irritation, and diarrhea. And about 40% say they suffer from PTSD. But while that was a particularly nasty derailment, the truth is it shouldn't have been that surprising. Last year, there were more than 1,000 train derailments in the US. That means an average of 3 per day. So train derailments happen a lot, and experts say the reason we haven't had massive loss of life in this country as a result is more luck than anything else.
The railroads are going to keep flirting with danger, keep flirting with disaster, as long as people are getting rich. I don't want to say that we dodged a bullet in East Palestine, but the next one may be in a major urban area.
Railway companies will tell you that safety has always been important to them, and they'll point out that derailments have fallen by 44% since 2000, which is true, although I'll point out that some of that is because we're running far fewer trains since then. Also, the rate of derailments for large railroads has been creeping up again in recent years. One railway veteran describes a major crash as just a matter of time, fearing there's going to be a freight train that hasn't been inspected in 90,000 miles that comes off the track and either explodes or leaks poisonous gas out. It can take something like that and a lot of deaths, and then all of a sudden, everybody's going to care.
Assuredly, here in the United States, the greatest country in the world, we'd never let anything like this continue to happen. Right? Unfortunately, the answer is wrong. We've done little to nothing about this. There's been no legislation passed in the almost 10 months, about 10 months, 11 months since the East Palestine derailment. Here to discuss all of this and to discuss an upcoming fundraiser he's putting together for East Palestine families is Maximilian Alvarez, editor-in-chief of the Real News Network and host of the Working People's Podcast. Max, nice to meet you, first off, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, right back at you, man. Thanks so much for having me on. I saw someone in the live chat said this is Status Lou edition. So I'm excited to be on the Wednesday Status Lou edition.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining. And I guess before we get into the specifics of East Palestine and the fundraiser and everything, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the fact that 10 months later, we haven't even seen a single piece of legislation to do anything about regulating the railroads in one way or another. Not even like we put one together for a PR stunt type piece of legislation. Nothing's happened. What do you make of all that?
Well, they put one together. It was the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act that has gone nowhere.
Right.
And It was like a big bipartisan thing. J.D. Vance, Sherrod Brown, like it was presented as this across the aisle effort.
Mm-hmm.
They were pushing it in the spring, and then the railroad lobby just like got to them, watered it down to shit, and now it's stalled and gone nowhere. So it is like, this is par for the course. This is what they always do, right? I mean, because in terms of the legislative side, what you just pointed out, I think is really important before I came on, right? Is like, the legislators in this country have blood on their hands here too, right? Because the railroads didn't just end up like this. This is a half a century long process of consolidation, deregulation, and effectively the U.S. government has enabled these massive and increasingly massive rail companies to form what is functionally an oligopolistic cartel. Like, they're not competing with each other.
No.
They don't need to compete for customers because they mostly have captive customer bases. Because if you are in control of a vital component of our supply chain like that, no one's building new railroads right now, right? So who's your competition? Like, CSX, Union Pacific, BNSF, like they all got their little parts of the country carved out. And there are a lot of customers, shippers, who have to use the rails. You can't just offload all of that onto trucks. It's not feasible. And it's also more dangerous to do that, to have this amount of vinyl chloride like right next to your daughter in the back seat on the highway. Like, no one wants that. But like that didn't just happen. That has been legislators asleep at the wheel or in the pocket of these companies and not doing their jobs to regulate these companies, not protecting our communities, and sure as hell not protecting railroad workers who, as you mentioned earlier, were in the midst of their high stakes contract fight last year. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, the Biden administration or the railroads don't even need to compete for employees and help work with labor there. I mean, the Biden administration came in, squashed the railroad strike almost a year ago. It was a year ago, last December, basically. And one of the things that those workers were highly concerned about was safety, was the fact that these trains that are a mile and a half long in a lot of cases only have 2 people on them for the most part. And the railroads, that's not sufficient for them. They want to make it more efficient, to use their words, have 1 person on these trains. And these trains are filled with who knows what on them. These towns that they're driving through don't know what's on them. In many cases, the regulators don't know what's on these trains in the right places. And the regulators don't have the manpower to even go and look to see, to try to regulate the industry at all. And, you know, like you said, trains are not, they're not bad. They don't have to be a bad thing. Trains are a more efficient way and a safer way in a lot of cases to move these goods. But you can't let the railroad companies, who are the ones who their only incentive that they actually care about is profit. You can't expect them to just like double check themselves and cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure that they're all good to go, or else you're going to continue to see what we saw in East Palestine happen. You would have thought, luckily East Palestine is a small community. It didn't happen in a big city, but who cares if it was a small community? You would think that, seeing this happen to this town of 4,500 people, this town essentially get poisoned and have their own government tell them that it was okay to return 3 days later. You'd think that would be enough to wake people up and would be enough for the legislators to get the political will to actually do something about this. But no, frankly, we haven't. And
you'd think that, but you're living in America, baby. Like, I mean, like this is so maddening. And I mean, like, I want to quickly start here because you played the John Oliver segment, or clips from the John Oliver segment. And I want it stated on the record that I'm very, very glad that segment exists, and that this issue and that framing of the issue is now more deeply rooted in public consciousness, because I also want to express solidarity with y'all as like someone who has been covering this for years.
Yeah.
And was not mentioned at all in that segment. Like,
right.
I mean, like, and it's not like, who am I? Like, John Oliver doesn't know who the hell I am, but it does suck because, like, this is a story that I have, like, covered relentlessly, along with my colleague Mel Buer when we were reporting on the railroads last year. Like, we were interviewing countless railroad workers, engineers, conductors, dispatchers, machinists in the machine yard, carmen, right? I mean, they're as folks watching this know, I mean, there are a lot of different people who make the railroads happen, and we were interviewing them. A lot of them had to do it anonymously or with pseudonyms because of the draconian work and attendance policies that they have to labor under. But like just doing all that work, hearing out of these stories from rank and file workers who see this stuff up close every single day, it really started to dawn on us over the course of last year that they were all warning about a catastrophe. And the example that they kept using was Loch Megantic in Canada, the infamous, like train crash that killed like over 40 people about like a decade or so ago. I actually really want to do a sort of comparative documentary looking at Loch Megantic and East Palestine, but that's a story for another day. But it was really striking me last year when we were interviewing railroad workers, mainly about the contract fight. They kept every single one of them would tell me some version of the same thing at the beginning. They would say, you have to understand this goes back a long way. And then you would get the big picture. You would start to hear, I won't rehearse the whole thing. Your viewers have heard this, so like I'll spare people, I'll give the Spark Notes version, right? But like we said, from 1980 onwards, just like John Oliver, like, and his crew tracked, they tracked the deregulation, they tracked the corporate consolidation, they tracked the Wall Street minded takeover of this industry, so that it has become a vehicle designed to maximize the profits of shareholders and executives while imperiling our communities, running workers into the ground, and actually hurting our economy. Because they keep saying that precision scheduled railroading is all about efficiency. And so the question has to be, efficiency for whom? Like, like who is this efficient for? Because we are actually statistically moving less freight than we should be. And shippers, as I mentioned, are pissed off because quality of service has been plummeting. Workers are pissed off because these companies have been slashing their workforce to the bone year after year after year. And that wasn't just COVID. Since 2015, the class 1 freight rail carriers have collectively eliminated 30% of their workforce.
Right.
Like I said, just cut after cut, because their whole philosophy, as John Oliver laid out, as we've covered on our shows, is to pile as much work onto as few workers as possible, make the trains as long as they can, unwieldy as they can. Some are a mile long, some are close to 3 miles long, and they want to get it down to 1-person crews on those trains, which is insane. But then you also get you start to see how those cuts, they look good on paper. They mean you're paying your workers less so you can recoup that, put it in your pockets. You can use it for stock buybacks, whatever.
You're keeping the shareholders happy, blah, blah, blah. Right. Yeah.
Shareholders are happy. Executive pays through the roof. They're all happy. But that stuff catches up with you, because you can't just keep cutting maintenance and safety measures that are there to prevent catastrophes like East Palestine, and cut the people who are doing that work and expect a catastrophe not to happen. And that's exactly what happened. And like in East Palestine on February 3rd. And like, we should all be so mad about this, because we were warned. We could see this coming. Railroad workers kept saying something like this was going to happen. And the thing I just wanted to really underline for people, and then I promise I'll shut up, is like,
this is why we brought you on.
Thanks. Like, I've also had a lot of 7-Eleven coffee, so apologies everyone watching. But like, so that is what led me through covering the railroad contract fight. Long before the national media in September of last year was like, oh shit, we might have a railroad strike. Where did this come from? And then we had a whole archive of interviews with workers to say, well, here's where it came from. Like, if you guys just open your ears and listen to the workers, you'll actually know how we ended up in this situation. And then February 3rd happened. And that's what led me to connect with not only more railroad workers to talk about what led to East Palestine and how and why it was avoidable, but I also connected to residents in East Palestine, as y'all did. And like, these are working people too. Like, I'm not necessarily interviewing them about their jobs like I do on my show Working People, but I am talking to them about their lives and about what it has been like for them to try to pick up the pieces after their community was devastated by corporate greed and government negligence. And it's a horror show, man. As you yourself, like have seen firsthand, like what these folks are living through is a nightmare. And it's not over. Like, like they are still in their houses getting nosebleeds. Folks like Chris Albright, who I am working with, to put on this live stream fundraiser, but who I also got to interview along with his amazing wife, Jess, back in September. I mean, Chris was a healthy, like, hardworking guy. He was a gas line worker. He was a foreman before the derailment. And then like 2 months after the derailment, he has massive heart failure. He can't work. He's going to die sooner than he was expecting. So how do you deal with that? And because he can't work, the bills are piling up. They can't move. How are you going to sell your house when your property value is plummeted?
And unfortunately, I mean, that's one example. And it's not like we're cherry picking here, because when I tell you there are hundreds of stories like that in this small town, I'm not exaggerating it, because I've lost track of how many East Palestine residents I've been in touch with throughout all of this. But that story that you're outlining is happening all over the place there. And essentially, they've all just been left hung out to dry. I spent yesterday for a couple hours catching up with some East Palestine residents. I still talk to a lot of them almost every week. And the stories are still heartbreaking. Sure, some of it changes over time, right? Some residents dealt with health effects right off the bat, and then they sort of got used to it and they were fine. Others were fine up front. They thought everyone complaining about health effects were lying. And then 2 months later, they started feeling health effects. Some of them are dealing more so with the financial end of it. East Palestine was not a wealthy place before this, even happened. The median income in the community was only roughly $28,000 a year. Then you drop this, bomb. I mean, you don't drop a bomb, that you just explode a train car essentially in their town, and then add that on top of it. And these folks are just dealing with horrendous situations still ongoing. And, you know, we've been trying to highlight it still, and you all have as well. And that's kind of why I reached out. I saw earlier this week on Twitter, you had put together this fundraiser. So I wanted to bring you on. And for folks watching right now, number one, first, please smash the like button. But number two, listen to the info about this fundraiser. And instead of sending a super chat or doing anything like that, I'd much rather you donate directly to this fundraiser that Max is putting on this weekend. I'll be joining at some point throughout the stream. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot from a lot of East Palestine residents. But if you want to just outline what you've got going on Saturday.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate it. And again, appreciate you having me on to plug this.
Yeah.
To everyone watching, again, if you watch this channel, you're invested in this story, please help us get these folks some of the aid that they need. We're not going to be able to get them everything they need because they have been put, as Lou just said, in an impossible situation, right? I mean, because while all this is going on, the governor refuses to declare an emergency, which would unlock more federal funds and yada, yada, yada. He just keeps asking for extensions. And it's like, well, what are you waiting for? Like, I mean, like, what more do you need to declare this a disaster emergency or an emergency disaster? And so the people are left in limbo. And as we've mentioned, right, I mean, like, they are feeling the effects and they're not getting the help that they need from their government. They're being told by the EPA, by Norfolk Southern, that everything is fine.
Yeah.
And all the while, you've got these hazmat crews who have been there all year just taking out all this toxic filled soil. And so the cognitive dissonance there of being told, like in an Orwellian sense, everything's fine, go back to your daily lives, while these guys who are working for the company telling you everything is fine can't even like stay in a house because the fumes are too much.
Right.
And they're saying,
I can assure you too. I mean, and I'm sure you too, but I mean, I've been there for about a month total in time over the last year. And I can tell you firsthand that I saw plenty of things and smelled plenty of things and felt plenty of things that tell you that it is not fine. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to do it. I don't need an air testing instrument that's clearly flawed to tell you that, like, oh, something's not right. When I'm in here for too long, I get a massive headache. I never get headaches. My nose starts to hurt. My eyes are burning. You don't need a detector that has all sorts of flaws to tell you that there are issues going on. It's ridiculous. And the fact that the people have just been lied to for so long at this point is disgusting, frankly.
It is. And like, so they've been abandoned. I mean, like, but I want to be clear, right, that, you know, the community is still fighting, right? I mean, like, these folks are still fighting for themselves, for their families, for their communities, for accountability. Like, they are the ones pushing to get answers, and we need to continually help them get what they need. And so that's where this all came about, right? And I'll lay it out quick because I know I gotta hop off.
Oh yeah, you're good.
The two things I was gonna say, one, because I didn't close the loop on this point before, but the thing I was gonna underline for folks is that the February 3rd derailment of the Norfolk Southern train in East Palestine and the subsequent controlled release of, you know, multiple cars filled with toxic vinyl chloride, spewing that massive black death plume into the air. It was one of the most consequential and disastrous industrial accidents in our country's history. And it could literally happen again tomorrow. Like, that is what I want to emphasize for people, is that in terms of addressing the key issues that created this disaster, the things that we could address to avoid it, we have done none of that. And so effectively, like, this could happen at any time. It could happen in a more populous area or a less populous area. But in terms of regulating what these cars, what's on these cars and how many of them can be on a train, nothing there, right? Forcing the rail companies to better staff, you know, their companies so that folks can be checking the cars, checking the rails properly, so on and so forth. That hasn't happened, right? I mean, like, even the provisions within the Railway Safety Act, like those have effectively gone nowhere at this point. Like so it could happen again tomorrow. So please don't get complacent about this just because the news cycle has moved on, and please don't forget about the residents who are still living through this nightmare just because the news cycle has moved on. I know the world is in a terrible place. Our hearts can only take so much. There's a lot going on. I don't think we're bad people for not thinking about East Palestine every single day. I get it, but I'm just asking now here, if we can, let's give these folks the love and attention and lift up their voices and their struggle as much as we can, because they really need it. And so that is what we are doing this Saturday. This is an idea that grew out of me interviewing the Albrights after interviewing other folks in and around East Palestine earlier in the year. I just couldn't stand by and not do more, right? I mean, because what do you do when someone like Chris Albright, a husband, a father, a former gas line worker who now has heart failure and doesn't know what to do, when he's asking you, like, how do I afford Christmas for my family? What would you do if you were in my position? He's asking me that on the podcast, and I'm like, I don't know. Because on your own, there's nothing you can do. It's just like I tell workers, like in their shops, I was like, you can't fight the boss on your own, but together you can fight and you can win. And that's the mentality that we're trying to bring to this struggle, right? Is, like, together we can help these families stay afloat. We can remind them that we haven't forgotten about them, and we can try to make a very stressful time of the year, after everything they've been through since February. Now they've got the holidays, right? So along with dealing with the health effects, being lied to by their government, by Norfolk Southern, forgotten by the media, all that, now the holidays are here. It's supposed to be a time of joy, togetherness, rest, relaxation. How are you going to do that when you are in this dire situation, when the bills are piling up, when all of this stuff is crashing down on you? And so what we're trying to do is just raise as much money as we can for the families of East Palestine who need it, so that we can disperse the funds that we raise in the form of gift cards, so that these folks can give their families the Christmas they deserve. That is the basic concept. Now, it is a little more difficult than, like, say, the past fundraisers I've done, or that folks like the Valley Labor Report have done that I've participated in, where you can raise money for striking workers and dump it straight into a strike fund that's going to go to members. That's a much easier sort of process. When you're trying to raise money for a whole town, and I am working with people in the town, orgs in the town, because as I told them, I was like, I need your knowledge. Right. You tell me, like, what you need. I don't want to touch the money. I just want to help you raise it. So that's how it came about. So we're working with you're working with the Way Station. We're working with the Albrights, the Way Station, a local nonprofit that has agreed that they've set up the fundraising portal. They are going to be administering that portal. The portal right now is anyone can donate to it. Please donate if you can. If you can't, please share it around. And Colin, you can drop the link in the chat here if we have it, and we'll make sure it's in the description if you're watching this later as well. And yeah, we can go ahead and pull up the information. There you go. Yep. Thanks so much, guys. And come join the live stream on. So that's what it's going to be. I'm going to be in this seat in Baltimore for 12 hours, doing a live stream on Saturday with my podcast producer, the great Jules Taylor. We're going to be doing that. We're going to have residents from Palestine and the surrounding area on throughout the 12 hours. We're going to have great folks like Lou and journalists who have been covering this across the year. We're going to have some specialists to talk to us about, like, water testing and where things stand now, but we're also going to have fun, right? I mean, we're going to try to entertain folks, encourage folks to donate, maybe have some special guests join, some folks from the labor community coming on, keeping the energy up. So the live stream is going to be going on the Working People YouTube channel from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday or Saturday, December 16th. Same time, residents in EP are going to be hosting an in-person party at the East Palestine Eagles Club from noon to 10 p.m. on the same day. So that we're also going to be checking in with them. It's going to be a fun, like, there's going to be live music and food and donated stuff. So, like, that's the premise. We're trying to raise as much money to that fundraising portal. We're asking folks around town to sign up. We don't need to know more. Just what's your name? do you live in the area? How many kids you got at home? And do you prefer a Target or Amazon gift card? So like, that's the basic premise. We're doing as best we can. We know one fundraiser is not going to solve everything, but let's get that Christmas spirit up and help this community that desperately needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for coming on and chatting with us. Happy to help get the word out about the fundraiser. Definitely stay tuned for information about that as it comes to, and we'll make sure all the links to the donations, the YouTube channel that it will be on this weekend, and everything are there. Max, thank you again so much. Nice to meet you virtually, at least here, and we'll chat with you again on Saturday.
Right back at you, brother. See you on Saturday. Solidarity, everybody. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll definitely make sure we get the information about that out there. And I can say too, the way station, speaking with a ton of residents in East Palestine, I know several of them who long before the derailment were getting help and assistance through the way station. They do a lot of great work in the community to make sure that folks are taken care of there. So you know that money will be in good hands with Max and with the way station there. So again, if you're able to donate to the cause there, please check out the links that are going to be in the chat and in the description for folks. For those of you watching right now, though, please smash the like button, because we are going to switch topics here now. And we're going to move on to what is currently going on in Washington, D.C., unfortunately. But we've got the latest on Zelensky actually visiting D.C. And what that means for Ukraine funding moving forward. Again, for those of you just joining us right now, though, please smash the like button. And I want to remind you, too, of our Status Coup membership holiday special going on right now. So you can get the 1 year level at the $5 level or the $10 level, essentially 2 months free. So that's $50 for the year or $100 for the year. You can see the link on the bottom there, statuscoupmember.com/store, to take advantage of that. If you want to just sign up for the regular monthly membership, though, you can still do so at $5 to $10 a month at statuscou.com/join. So if you want to take advantage of that, that is a great place to do so. But let's move on here to the latest in Ukraine. I talked a little bit about this last week, actually, for those of you who watched when we went through the section on the southern border, which is, regardless of how you look at it, regardless of what end of the issue you're on, it's a mess. If you don't think it's a mess, you're lying to yourself, probably. So it's interesting to see this come back up and how it ties back into the U.S. border. But first, let's go ahead and play it. We're going to play a couple clips here. First, though, we're going to start off with the meeting between President Biden and Zelensky, where Biden is urging Congress to act to pass more money to aid Ukraine. Colin, we can go ahead and play that clip.
Congress needs to pass a supplemental funding for Ukraine before they break the holiday recess, before they give Putin the greatest Christmas gift they could possibly give him. And so because we've seen what happens when dictators don't pay the price for the damage and the death and the destruction they cause, and they keep going when no price is paid. The threats to America, to Europe, and the world will only keep rising if we don't act. And I intend that we act. The American people, Democrats and Republicans alike, I think, understand this, and they understand the very real fight that's going on right now. In the winter, this winter, Putin plans once again to bombard Ukraine's electric grid, intends to, with rockets, plunging families into darkness in the coldest part of the year and doing great damage. We can't and won't let him succeed. We mustn't let him succeed in that.
So Biden saying we can't let Putin succeed. We're going to get into some specifics here on what at this point Ukraine can do. I'm not super optimistic about Ukraine's position in this war at this point, whether we give them more money or not, unfortunately. Absolutely sympathetic to their cause. Not a fan of Vladimir Putin, but what is Ukraine going to be able to do at this point? The next clip we're going to play here, though, is kind of Zelensky speaking back to Biden here, explaining some of Ukraine's goals and actually thanking the workers at U.S. defense companies. I'm going to get back to the worker comment later. There's kind of an interesting theme here going on, in my opinion. Colin, we can go ahead and play this next clip.
Our goals for 24 are clear. Take away Russia's superiority and disrupt their offensive operations. And I think it's real. And also some other important things. I met with the heads of American defense companies yesterday. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Really powerful companies. I thank them and thanks all the workers engineers, managers who build the strength of American weapons, helping Ukraine boost the development of arsenals of democracy.
So there's Zelensky essentially saying his goal in 2024, I'm paraphrasing a bit here, is to prevent Russia from moving further in and taking out some of their key military infrastructure. Again, I haven't seen a whole lot made public. He did explain, he's saying that behind closed doors, they're explaining some of the details of these plans and whatnot. None of that has really been made public. I would understand to a degree you're not going to make all of it public one way or the other, just because it is a war. But again, the math potentially not really adding up here. But again, Zelensky had a busy trip here. It was not just meeting with President Biden. He also had a meeting both at the same time with Chuck Schumer as well as Mitch McConnell, obviously the Senate majority and minority leaders. They were, pushing this as a big bipartisan Senate meeting, which in reality, most of the Republicans in the Senate are not for sending more money to Ukraine right now necessarily. Not all of them, but a lot of them are kind of shifting against it. Tides are turning in that department. But Mitch McConnell still right in line here. We can play just a clip of them walking back out from CNN.
What's your message to Vladimir Putin? President Zelensky just said, I am not speaking to him. It was hard to make out much more of what he said there, other than he said he had a very good dialogue with members of the U.S. Senate. And it's the picture as much as anything that you are seeing right now that matters for him. He has the Republican minority leader, Mitch McConnell, at one side, the Senate Democratic majority leader, Chuck Schumer, at the other. This is very intentional. This was meant to show the bipartisan support in the U.S. Senate. Wait, let's listen.
Journalists, senators, Congress for helping us, support us. We spoke about so many details, but it will be between us. Sorry. Thank you.
And there he goes to continue his schedule today, off to the Pentagon now.
So if you were to just see those couple clips that I played so far, you would think that at this point, it looks like a pretty successful trip for Zelensky to D.C. He says in there, I made the point that he didn't have a lot of details that he was sharing publicly. He said, we talked about a lot of details. Again, I do have sympathy for the guy. He's doing exactly what he needs to be doing to try to get more money. I mean, that's fully his prerogative. But I'm just curious, what if we send more money? What is it going to lead to? And this next person that I'm going to play a clip of here, I did not think I was going to find myself agreeing with him on anything. I mostly disagree with him on everything else. He's terrible on so many other issues that I care about. But I tend to agree with the questions that the Speaker of the House, the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is asking in his kind of post-meeting interview he did after speaking with Zelensky. I broke this up into two sections because I think it's important to talk about each one separately. So first, let's take a listen to what Mike Johnson said after the meeting, as far as, asking what is the plan for victory for Ukraine here. Colin, we can go ahead and play that clip.
We need a clear articulation of the strategy to allow Ukraine to win. And thus far, their responses have been insufficient. They have not provided us the clarity and the detail that we have requested over and over since literally 24 hours after I was handed the gavel as Speaker of the House. And so what the Biden administration seems to be asking for is billions of additional dollars with no appropriate oversight, no clear strategy to win, and none of the answers that I think the American people are owed.
Now, I would say that it's hard to find something to disagree with in that statement. So I do agree with the question here, especially being like, just think strategically about this for a second. And I'm not an expert in this, so feel free to criticize, or if you've got another thought, definitely let me know in the chat here, and I'll try to keep an eye on some of them. But the time to negotiate is well past, I would imagine. I mean, I'm sure Ukraine wants to negotiate now, even though he said that he's not. Zelensky said he's not speaking with Putin anymore. But Russia seems to be in a very strong position at the moment. We hit them, I say we as in the United States, NATO, many other countries hit them with sanctions really hard early on. Their economy dipped briefly and then came right back. Their economy is now, they're isolated from a lot of different things, but they've sorted it out. They're not on the brink of some collapse right now that I'm aware of. Like we've essentially hardened their economy so that they can deal with this. So hitting them with more sanctions, I'm not sure if that's even possible. How many more we can do? So economically, they're okay. Militarily, I mean, they still have a massive military. At one point early on, they were taking massive hits. But when you compare it to the Ukrainian military, where it actually just came out this afternoon, I don't have an element for this to put up on the screen to show you, but Ukraine is actually considering bringing in men over the age of 40 into the Ukrainian military. You tell me if you think that that's a sign of a military that's got a whole bunch of, troops ready to fight and whatnot. You're not bringing men over 40 into battle unless you are in dire straits, I would imagine. So they're not on a good footing there. If the money stops flowing into Ukraine with more weapons and whatnot, I obviously that's going to be the end. But if they keep the money flow coming in, it's not like they're going to pick up ground against the Russian military at this stage of the game. So what does victory even look like for Ukraine at this point? I would love to see some sort of compromise. Yes, but why would Russia just compromise and give Ukraine back all of the territory that it had before at this point? If you're in Russia's shoes, again, Putin is terrible. He does lots of bad things, but if you try to put yourself in his shoes, why would they give some of these regions in eastern Ukraine back to the Ukrainians, kind of, when the Ukrainians don't have any leverage at this point? So any sort of compromise is going to involve Russia getting more Ukrainian territory than they had before, is what it seems like. I just don't see the math for Ukraine having its original borders back before this. I don't see the reason why that is happening. So I'll be curious to see what happens with all of that. The next clip from this meeting is interesting, and I hope that this is also tied to just all international military spending, although we'll see if this matters in a second. But Mike Johnson is in the next clip talks about international military spending and tying it to the border. Let's go ahead and play that clip.
I have also made very clear from day one that our first condition on any national security supplemental spending package is about our own national security first. The border is an absolute catastrophe, and this is because of the policies of this White House and this administration. We had 12,000 illegal crossings on one day last week alone, on Wednesday. We have almost now 280 known terrorists that have been apprehended at the border. None of this counts the gotaways. If you add the numbers up, it's almost 7 million people who have been encountered at the border just since President Biden took office, and at least 2 million gotaways. This is twice the population of my state of Louisiana.
Again, so last week we talked in depth about this, and if you're curious to go see more of it, you can find that it was last week's live stream. I probably spent a half an hour talking about the border and lightly how it was at the time, just for the first time last Wednesday, they were really tying it to Ukraine. And sure enough, here we are a week later. That is now kind of becoming a lot more of an issue here. So Mike Johnson there says, though, no new international military spending until there is the border bill that the Republicans have put through the House. So the Republicans have put a bill on an immigration bill through the House this May. And essentially it's a pretty, there's a lot of things missing from the bill. Within the bill is essentially a redo of our asylum system, making it much more strict. It, in a lot of ways, kind of brings back something that looks a little bit like Title 42, but not quite, which there are some issues with that. A few things that the bill is missing, and I highlighted this in detail in the past, but a few things the bill is missing is any sort of update to the immigration courts. The backlogs would still be there. However, it would allow people to essentially be sent back before they even get a court date in some cases, which is a major red flag, obviously. I think that's an unfair way to deal with this, probably. So a lot of things within the bill, some of it is still kind of being sussed out of what's included and what's not, but it's an interesting attachment here because the issues aren't really related, right? I'm not a fan of sending more military aid to Ukraine or to Israel or sending military money anywhere. I think, spending money on war is a bad deal for the United States. But it's interesting to see them tie this together, and it makes a lot more sense though in a second. And I'm gonna play one more clip of Zelensky actually first, and then we'll tie this all up with a bow and relate them all together here. So one other meeting that Zelensky had during this trip was with defense contractors, which is interesting, and in it he thanks the workers again. So let's go ahead and play this clip, Colin.
Thank you so much. I'll be happy to be in dialogue today. For us, it's very important during the war that to know and to share details of the war, and to share real, very concrete things, what we need and where you already helped us. That's why I want to thank you, all of you and your partners. And of course, please pass from me messages to your workers, people who really work and they did a lot for Ukraine. Just fine. I mean, we are facing to this war as unprovoked war, and we understand that without such people, companies, and such workers, and we really couldn't manage and save our land. And we are very thankful that we have such friends.
So again, that was literally the video put out by Zelensky on his Twitter account right afterwards. In the tweet, one of the main lines in it was, quote, "Together we can create more jobs, generate more strength, and provide more opportunities for both of our nations." So again, mentioning the jobs here, I've heard this argument from a couple people recently as well. And essentially a lot of Americans are rightfully wondering why we should be spending more money in so many of these foreign conflicts. And the latest argument that is being spun up is that, well, a lot of that money is going to Ukraine, sure, but then they're spending the money at U.S. defense contractors, which manufacture weapons in the United States. So it's actually a jobs creator, and it helps people with more jobs. I would argue that, okay, sure, if you spend $100 billion on weapons in the United States, yes, I guess some of it is going to go to jobs. But what if we spent that $100 billion on, I don't know, like building infrastructure in the United States? Wouldn't that also create jobs instead of go to a foreign war on the other side of the world and have more U.S. weapons be used to kill people in different faraway places and have more people get mad? I can go down the rabbit hole, but I don't think I need to, because it's not a great argument in my opinion. So anyway, that is kind of the latest going on there, and it's still kind of up in the air of if Zelensky is going to be able to get this money. At first glance, it just really seemed like after that Mike Johnson meeting that I was highlighting a second ago, it wasn't going to happen. That money probably was going to be dead on arrival, not going anywhere, because you would think that the Biden administration would have, no real reason to lean into passing this Republican border bill that they're pushing forward. But news came out just yesterday afternoon that actually might not be the case, and that the Biden administration might actually be considering passing this Republican bill in line with the Ukraine aid, Israel aid, as well as aid to Taiwan. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the article from CBS News, actually. And the article headline, "White House open to new border expulsion law, mandatory detention and increased deportations in talks with Congress." So this is pretty interesting. I'm going to read a little bit. I'm going to skip down a little bit here. Bear with me for 1 second. So in recent days, Mr. Biden's administration has intensified engagements with lawmakers. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas started engaging with with negotiators in the Senate this week. 3 people with knowledge of his engagement told CBS News. Mayorkas was on Capitol Hill Tuesday afternoon as lawmakers continued talks aimed at reaching a deal before Congress adjourns for the holidays, which is a shock to me. A senior Department of Homeland Security official said Mayorkas and other DHS officials are providing, quote, technical assistance to lawmakers and their staff. not negotiating policy proposals. Specifically, the White House indicated that it would support a new far-reaching legal authority to allow U.S. border officials to summarily expel migrants without processing their asylum claims. The measure would effectively revive the Trump-era Title 42 pandemic order and allow officials to pause U.S. asylum law without a public health justification. The administration would also back a nationwide expansion of a process known as expedited removal that allows immigration officials to deport migrants without court hearings if they don't ask for asylum or if they fail their initial asylum interviews. The program is currently limited to the border region. Moreover, the White House would be willing to mandate the detention of certain migrants who are allowed into the country pending the adjudication of their claims. It's unclear how this provision would work, since the U.S. government has never had the detention space to detain all migrants who cross into the country illegally. Administration officials and some Senate Democrats have also previously indicated a willingness to raise the initial screening standard for so-called credible fear interviews that migrants have to pass to avoid being deported under expedited removal. In a statement, White House spokesperson Angelo Hernandez said that the administration did not have, quote, determined policy positions in the congressional negotiations. So the article goes on here. This is all developing pretty quickly here too. There's still discussions going on back and forth. I listened to a couple different folks on this morning. I listened a little bit. Emily Jashinsky at Breaking Points, Counterpoints. She's on the right, and she listens. She actually knows quite a bit on the border. She did a documentary on the border a year or two ago. So I'm curious what she says whenever there's legislation like this being floated. And she had an interesting thought that I wanted to point. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, but she actually thought that the Republicans are kind of in a weird spot on this because if obviously they want this border bill to happen. But they're not willing to negotiate on it at all, really, because if they get one piece of the puzzle, meaning, let's say that the Biden administration is willing to say, okay, we want the Ukraine aid, but we want we'll be willing to compromise on giving more money for more border patrol agents and drones and that sort of thing. That doesn't actually just solve the problem, right? There's still going to be a flow of folks who are going to want to be coming to the United States. No amount of people is necessarily going to prevent that from happening. If you say we'll just want to do the kind of Title 42 version minus the public health argument, that actually doesn't do a whole lot, because in a lot of cases, Title 42, folks would come over and they would, instead of being deported back to whatever country they came from, they would be released back into Mexico on the same day in a lot of cases, and it makes it easy for them to come right back across. So Republicans really want to force their whole bill. And not a small version of it. An interesting thing that happens, though, if that whole bill does go through, and for whatever reason the Biden administration does consider passing it as it stands right now, and I don't think the likelihood of that is very high, now Biden can campaign on the fact that he is working with Republicans to solve the border crisis, blah, 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 blah. Whereas if the border stays a mess during the next year leading up to the election, that is something that Republicans can campaign on. So it's an interesting thing where, if they're trying to campaign on, we can improve the border, they can't do that anymore if the Biden administration passes the thing that they did. Obviously, it goes against a lot of what the Biden administration has said before. The politics of all of this shouldn't matter, but unfortunately, with all of these issues, it's what matters the most in so many ways. So I'll be curious to see where this goes in the long term. I really don't think something's going to happen before the holiday break. Mayorkas is, I don't know what the heck he's seeing. Obviously, he sees more than I do, but I'll be curious to see, if anything gets passed before the break. But definitely something I'll be keeping an eye on. And it was interesting to see it develop so much from last week to today. We're going to get into one last segment here, though, but please smash the like button for those of you still watching. We're going to get into Bernie's strongly worded letter that he sent today, condemning. Also, we'll just read the letter. How about that? Colin, let's go ahead and pull this up. It's not a very long letter. I do want to read the whole thing, though, because it's important to get the full context. And in my opinion, this is too little, too late. I ridicule a lot of people for sending strongly worded letters at one point or another, and this is just another version of that. So this is from Bernie Sanders to President Biden. Dear President Biden, we all know the current war in the Middle East was begun by Hamas. Hamas's brutal attack on Israel, which killed some 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, and took more than 240 hostages. American citizens were among those killed and abducted by Hamas. We share the belief that Israel has the right to defend itself and respond against the perpetrators of the October 7th attack. But while there is a moral case for military response against a brutal terrorist attack, it is clear that the Netanyahu government's current campaign is being conducted in a deeply immoral way. A just cause for war does not excuse atrocities in the conduct of that war. Israel has the right to go to war against Hamas. It does not have the right to go to war against innocent men, women, and children in Gaza. Israel's reliance on widespread and indiscriminate bombardment, including with massive explosives ordnance in deeply populated urban areas, is unconscionable. Israel's military campaign will be remembered among some of the darkest chapters of modern history. Consider the toll thus far. As of December 11th, within a population of 2.3 million people in Gaza, it is estimated that some 18,000 have been killed and more than 49,000 wounded since October 7th, 70% of whom are women and children, which is very crazy. The United Nations, World Health Organization, human rights monitors, outside academic studies, and the Israeli government itself find these figures to be broadly reliable. The UN and US officials believe, if anything, the count may be higher, with thousands of bodies being trapped beneath the rubble. So far, 134 UN workers have been killed. The article goes on, the letter goes on, nearly 1.9 million people, more than 85% of the population, have been driven from their homes across Gaza, despite sharing of coordinates with Israeli forces. 40 UN facilities have sustained direct hits, 61 UN installations have sustained collateral damage, and 11 bakeries have been destroyed in the bombardment. The UN reports over 234,000 housing units have been damaged and more than 46,000 homes completely destroyed, amounting to 60% of the housing stock. A figure confirmed by academic analysis of satellite radar data. To put this in historical perspective, this means the destruction of Gaza is now equivalent to that of Dresden, where 2 years of bombing during World War II made the city's name synonymous with total destruction. Robert Pape, professor of political science at the University of Chicago, has documented the Allied bombings of Dresden from 1943 to 1945, severely damaged 56% of the non-industrial buildings, half of its homes, and killed about 25,000 people. The article goes on here too, and actually I want to read one last point. Some 1.3 million people are sheltering in 154 overcrowded UN facilities. So there is a little bit more here, and I'm going to read just a couple of the highlights of the stats that I pulled from that. Again, my main takeaway is, where was this essentially 6 weeks ago from Senator Sanders? I mean, it was clear that there was an indiscriminate bombing campaign happening then. Even a little bit of a grace period. Sure. Okay, fine. It's been a really long time. Glad to see him, being more stern on this at this point, but where were you before? But some of the stats in this showing the scale of just what has just continued to take place in Gaza. Over 250,000 housing units damaged or destroyed. 250,000. That is essentially setting this up so that these folks have nowhere to go back to when they're done being told to run over here, move over there, to essentially dodge where these bombings are happening. And in some cases, when they're told to go somewhere, it doesn't matter that it's too late. They got hit with something anyway. Terrible. And if you're, looking at what Israel's intentions are, essentially destroying or damaging that much of the housing supply is insane. 134 UN workers being killed. That stood out to me because that means you're very likely targeting and hitting, whether you're targeting them or you're just blatantly shooting things out there, you're hitting facilities where aid workers are sitting, meaning you're also just hitting facilities that all of these innocent civilians are at, seeking help, whatever it may be. That obviously not looking good, and none of this is new. It's just seeing all of this put together was interesting. The 1.3 million people in 150 essentially like makeshift, like, hey, here's a place you should go, equates to roughly 9,000 people per facility. I'm sure some of them are larger, some of them are smaller, right? But that's an insane amount of people. If on average it's 9,000 people, that's 9,000 people to feed. That's 9,000 people needing to go to the bathroom. That's 9,000 people, needing a place to sleep. This has been going on for a while now, but the amount of aid being able to get in the first place has been terrible. The amount of people in the beginning who there probably weren't 150 facilities early on in this. That is not sustainable at all. And where are these people going to go if 250,000 housing units are damaged severely or destroyed? Where do these people go? And then this last one, and I didn't get to reading it in the article there, but this one is extremely sad. 8 in 10 in South Gaza, which is where Israel has told people to go to get away from the bombing campaigns and the war, or they at least did initially, and now there's still bombing happening down there now too. 8 in 10 in South Gaza can't find enough food to eat. And that number rises to 94% if you're in North Gaza. So 94% of people in North Gaza basically don't have enough food. And 8 in 10, 80% can't find enough food to eat in South Gaza, even if they're at, that's including folks who are at these makeshift, facilities that they're being, they're essentially refugees in. Those numbers are terrible. This is a sad atrocity that's taken place over this huge amount of time. The end of it, it is a complicated issue. We've talked about it at length here, but I just wanted to bring the kind of update from Senator Sanders that came out finally. His strongest condemnation, if you will. But it's been it's too little, too late coming from Senator Sanders at this point in time. So that's the show for today. Again, I do want to urge people. We started the show with Max Alvarez on. I do want to urge people to check out the fundraiser that he's going to be have going on Saturday. Again, I'll be there for part of the show. I don't know exactly which time slot yet, but again, the link for that will be in the description here, or Colin, if you have it handy and you want to put it in the chat one more time, that would be greatly appreciated. Again, folks in East Palestine have been going through a lot. This could be at least just a little bit of a boost for them to help get some Christmas gifts, things like that, going into the holiday season. I believe we got a $5 via Rockfin from Gregory Fuller. So thank you very much, Gregory, for sending that over. And again, I do want to highlight again the holiday specials we have on membership. If you're interested in becoming a Status Coup member, 1 year at the $10 level, you're essentially getting, either way, you're essentially getting 2 months free. So it's $100 for the year, $50 for the year at the $5 level. And if you want to just do monthly still, statuscoup.com/join, you can do that. But otherwise, to take advantage of the special, statuscoupmember.com/store. It's been a crazy couple weeks here. I was definitely interested to see interested to see what happens with the Ukraine funding, the border bill. It's been interesting to kind of follow over the last week and whatnot. I was surprised to see that the Biden administration is considering potentially doing something with that yesterday, but we'll keep an eye on it as always. I believe Ron is here tomorrow. If not, it'll be Jordan or Ron will be here tomorrow live. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell to make sure you get the notification that we will be live. Otherwise, I'm going to take it word salad. I'm just going to stop talking before I say something crazy. Thank you all so much for watching and have a good night.